For nearly 2 millennia, the chair of St. Peter has stood as the ultimate symbol of spiritual authority for Catholics worldwide. It is a seat of immense power, of profound responsibility, and according to Scripture, a divine foundation. It is a lineage tracing back, Catholics believe, to the Apostle Peter himself. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, Jesus declares, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." The rock, a foundation of divine promise, meant to withstand any storm, any challenge for all time. Yet the men who have sat upon that throne, who have borne the immense weight of that title, were not divine. They were men with all the frailties, ambitions, and capacity for error that comes with being human. And throughout the long, complex history of the church, there have been times when the man meant to be the rock instead became a stumbling block, a source of scandal that tested the very foundations of the faithful. Today, we examine the darkest moments of the papal legacy when the successors of St. Peter became symbols not of virtue, but of vice. When we speak of bad popes, we are referring to those whose pontificates were marred by profound moral failure, rampant corruption, abuse of authority, violence, or who brought widespread disgrace and suffering upon the church. Let's pull back the curtain on a few infamous examples. Step into the murky world of the 10th century, a period often referred to as the pornocracy, due in part to figures like Pope John XII. Imagine a teenager, barely out of adolescence, elevated to the highest office in Christendom amidst the violent political factions of Rome. But instead of guiding the church, John XII quickly turned the Lateran Palace, the very heart of the papacy, into something resembling a brothel. Contemporary accounts detail a litany of shocking behaviors. Accusations against him included adultery with various women, including his own relatives, perjury, blasphemy while celebrating Mass, and even murder. One bishop reportedly testified that John XII invoked demons. He was more concerned with hunting, feasting, and womanizing than with spiritual leadership. His complete disregard for spiritual matters and his scandalous lifestyle made him a symbol of the depths to which the papacy could sink. He was eventually deposed by a synod of bishops and the Holy Roman Emperor, though he managed to briefly regain control before his death, which, according to legend, occurred during an adulterous liaison. John XII remains a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and moral decay at the highest levels. Moving slightly earlier to the late 9th century, we encounter Pope Stephen VI, a name forever etched in infamy for a single grotesque act, the Cadaver Synod of 897. In a display of political vengeance that beggars belief, Stephen ordered the 9-month-old corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, exhumed. The rotting body was dressed in papal vestments, propped up on a throne in a Roman basilica, and subjected to a formal trial. Formosus was accused of violating canon law while still alive. With a deacon appointed to answer for the deceased pontiff, the macabre spectacle unfolded. Unsurprisingly, Formosus was found guilty. His papacy was declared null and void, his acts as pope invalidated. In a final, horrifying act of desecration, the 3 fingers of the right hand, used for papal blessings, were cut off, and the corpse was dragged through the streets before being thrown into the river Tiber. It was an act so outrageous, so sacrilegious, that it repulsed even the hardened citizens of Rome. Our journey through the less glorious chapters brings us to the Renaissance, an age of great art and learning, but also of profound corruption within the church hierarchy. Here, the name Borgia looms large, specifically Pope Alexander VI, who reigned from 1492 to 1503. Born Rodrigo Borgia into a prominent Spanish family, Alexander VI was a master manipulator, a political animal whose primary goal seemed to be the aggrandizement of himself. His pontificate was openly dominated by nepotism and a relentless pursuit of wealth and power for his family. He fathered numerous illegitimate children, most notably the ruthless Cesare and the infamous Lucrezia, whom he shamelessly used to further his political ambitions. arranging marriages and securing positions of power for them through bribery, intrigue, and even violence. Alexander VI's court was notorious for its opulence, its political machinations, and the rumored poisonings of rivals. His scandalous personal life and his use of the papacy for personal and familial gain severely damaged the moral authority of the Church and contributed significantly to the climate that would lead to the Protestant Reformation just years after his death. And we cannot overlook Pope Benedict IX in the 11th century, a figure so controversial he held the papacy 3 separate times, his reigns interrupted by expulsions and resignations. His personal life was reportedly so dissolute that he was accused of numerous offenses, including murder and adultery. Most astonishingly, he is infamous for selling the papacy twice. Driven by a desire to marry or simply escape the burdens of the papacy, he is recorded as having sold the office to his godfather, Gregory VI. This act of blatant simony, the buying or selling of ecclesiastical privileges, was a shocking abdication of spiritual responsibility and a clear violation of church law. His tenure was so disruptive and his reputation so poor that he was driven out of Rome on multiple occasions. Let's turn to Pope Boniface VIII, who reigned from 1294 to 1303. Boniface was a fierce advocate for papal supremacy, believing the Pope held ultimate authority over both spiritual and temporal matters. This led him into a dramatic and ultimately destructive conflict with King Philip IV of France. Philip sought to tax the clergy in his kingdom to fund his wars, a move Boniface opposed, viewing it as an infringement on the Church's autonomy and papal authority. This conflict escalated over years, involving mutual excommunications, political maneuvering, and intense propaganda from both sides. Pope Boniface issued the papal bull Unum Sanctum, one of the most forceful statements on papal authority, claiming spiritual and temporal power over all rulers. Philip IV responded with defiance, ultimately sending agents to arrest the elderly pope. Philip's agents, led by Guillaume de Nogaret and Sierra Colonna, from a Roman family opposed to Boniface, assaulted the papal palace in Anagni, where Boniface was residing. The elderly pope was captured, likely physically assaulted, though the extent is debated, and held prisoner for a few days. Although he was quickly freed by the local populace, the humiliation and trauma of the event were immense. Boniface died in Rome about a month after the Anagni incident. The exact cause of his death is debated. Was it directly a result of the physical mistreatment and shock he endured, or did it simply hasten the end for an old and already ailing man? Perhaps one of the most famous twists in his legacy is his depiction in Dante's Inferno. Dante, a contemporary who was himself exiled due to the political fallout in Florence, partly influenced by Boniface's policies, places Boniface VIII in the 8th circle of hell, reserved for simony, the buying or selling of church offices. This is a powerful and lasting literary condemnation, suggesting that despite his strong claims of authority, Dante viewed him as deeply corrupt at his core. Centuries later, in the heart of the opulent Renaissance, sat Pope Leo X, a son of the powerful Medici family. While a patron of the arts and sciences, his papacy was marked by lavish spending and financial mismanagement. To fund his projects, including the rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, he significantly ramped up the sale of indulgences. This practice, already controversial, reached new heights under Leo X, becoming a flashpoint. And here's a twist of fate with monumental consequences. It was this very policy that provoked a German friar named Martin Luther to nail his 95 Theses to a church door, igniting the Protestant Reformation, a profound religious upheaval sparked, in part, by papal finances and perceived corruption. Even his death in 1521 holds a minor mystery, with contemporary rumors of poisoning, though malaria is the more accepted cause. These accounts offer a sobering perspective on the human element within a divine institution. These popes, each in his own way, remind us that no institution, however sacred its origin, is immune to corruption. The office of the Pope was meant to reflect the humility of Peter, the fisherman turned shepherd, but at times it mirrored Caesar more than Christ. These periods of scandal and corruption were undoubtedly challenging for the faithful and had lasting impacts on the course of history. Yet despite these dark chapters, the papacy has endured. The church built on the rock, as imperfectly represented by its human leaders, has continued for 2 millennia. To understand the failures of these men is not to reject the faith they inherited, but to recognize the need for vigilance, humility, and reform in every generation.